The American war machine is on the move again. Echoing the escalation in the early days of the Vietnam conflict, President Barack Obama announced plans to send hundreds more military personnel to Syria. The White House claims its ground troops will help fight ISIL terrorists. Yet others, including Iran, disagree, with Iran's foreign ministry warning any dispatch of military forces must be carried out in coordination with the Syrian government.
The US's military plans come as a fragile ceasefire nearly collapsed after foreign-backed militants pulled out of the negotiations in Geneva. Iranian officials are committed to supporting the Syrian government, even if the truce breaks down, stating certain countries dependent on Western colonialism are not committed to observing the ceasefire, and adding, these powers disregard the ceasefire as much as they can and use force.
Can America genuinely help fight ISIL? Will US military action in Syria be helpful or harmful? And is Washington being reckless or deliberately destructive? These are the simple questions we sought to answer. Now, Obama has deployed up to 250 more military personnel to Syria. Given that each time the US has sent troops to the region, it has increased terrorism, is the American public supportive of this move?
Supportive of the move to send more military advisors to Syria? No, I'm not.
When you say every time, I don't think you're talking about 250 people. That's not going to make any difference one way or the other.
I'm supportive of that move. I'm supportive of whatever they think it's going to take out ISIS. You know what I mean? Because they're the guys that are making everybody look bad in the Middle East. They're extreme. So yeah, we're gonna have to do what we got to do. I'm no military person, but I do believe we have to show a show of force.
Yes, I am. I believe it's important to help people in the region, and sometimes it's necessary to deploy troops to do so, unfortunately.
I guess I would take slight issue with the premise of your question, where you say that this is increased terrorism every time. I suppose that defines how you define terrorism. I think that the West in general has more of a role to play in Syria, whether that is with military troops, I don't know. So
I'm unsure of where I stand. I support some level of intervention, but I'm unsure of how much actual troops on the ground is helpful, or if it exacerbates the situation.
Do our experts support the American president's decision to send hundreds of military personnel to Syria, given Washington's track record of interference?
Well, it's difficult to be supportive of any moves that the US makes, especially military moves in the Middle East. And this is just another one of those occasions where it beggars belief that the United States is sending more troops, even though after a ceasefire and a deal has been reached with the Russians and the Syrians. This has to be seen as what it is, a last-ditch attempt, a last throw of the dice by the Americans to foment more rebellion and more fighting in the Syrian region, and keep the revolution, or the rebellion as they call it, keep it going. I don't think it's going to work, and it will increase terrorism, but it will also increase the resolve of the Syrians to finish it off.
I don't see how anyone can be supportive of it on an individual level. But then again, I'm not too certain that Obama's got much of a say in it. This tends to be part of a bigger thing than American domestic politics, I think. This destruction that's going on, and that's what it isn't a war, it's kind of random, systematic destruction. You kind of wonder what else can be produced from it. I mean, behind it all is what? Is a sort of, that's the essence of capitalism. It's the way the industrial military complex works. It has to destroy things in order to produce things. It seems to me that everyone thinks that Syria is the start of a story. Well, it's not. I mean, it's an ongoing story that's been going for many years. You know, the British themselves have been in the Middle East for 90 of the last 130 years. So it's a kind of, for me, it's just a continuance of colonialism, if you like, economic occupation. I think what Obama thinks or doesn't think doesn't go anywhere, really.
Typically, the US didn't coordinate with the Syrian government, effectively making this another military invasion. We invited the public to predict if this latest US invasion will be productive or destructive.
I think that US military intervention in other countries is generally not a good thing.
That is hard to say. It would be nicer if the nations in this region could work together. Whether they can work together with the Syrian government is a totally different question. Actually, it's highly in doubt. But it would be nice if all the Middle Eastern countries could unite and work for peace in that region, and also accept all the refugees that are coming from Syria, that they could also find a home in the Middle East and not only have to go to Europe, for example.
I don't know that it'll make much difference, really. It just goes on and on, doesn't it? So it's a dreadful area. I feel sorry for President Obama.
Well, we'll have to see what happens, because you really don't ever see what really goes on behind the scenes. You just see what you hear about. But I know it's like we have to defend ourselves, and we have to take out the main source is what we have to do. It's a tough situation. We have very good people. We have very good people who don't want to harm us, but then we have people that like go to the extreme, and they say they believe the same thing. So how do you find out who's the bad guy? It's a very tough situation right now. So we have to try. We can't sit here and not do anything. But whether it's the right thing to do, I don't know.
I have a fear that it may backfire, just given our previous track record of, it seems like that we don't coordinate well with the countries that we intervene with and work with their existing military groups, or to leave a stable situation.
It will be destructive.
We shouldn't have taken out Assad. We should have just kept him there and worked with him, and then hopefully, they would have elected a new leader or getting in it with politics. Because now that he's not there, or now that his presence isn't felt as much, it's really hard for the military to fight ISIS within Syria. So I think they should have kept him there, should have coordinated with them, kind of like we're doing in Afghanistan whenever we first started in Afghanistan, not really what we're doing now. So yeah, I think we should have been coordinating with them, coordinating with Assad, because I mean, a lot of those ISIS people we were arming to try to get Assad out of there, and now look at, I mean, we did that with Al Qaeda in the 80s whenever the Soviet Union was trying to invade Afghanistan. We gave them, and now they're Al Qaeda and Mujahideen and stuff like that. So I think we definitely should have worked with them on, especially their government, because they're going to know the best route on how to do that.
I think it's destructive. I'm not sure that the American people support that kind of the invasion. So that this is something that people from America should say, not myself.
When considering how helpful or harmful America's independent military actions in Syria will be, our experts held very strong views.
Well, it's typical of US arrogance not to coordinate with the Syrian government. Of course, it will be destructive. That is the point of the mission. Sending these 250 troops to fight ISIS is what they want us to believe. 250 troops just doesn't cut it. We've known that the US military presence has been very ineffective against ISIS, and these 250 troops are there for other reasons, not for fighting ISIS. So it will be destructive.
I don't think it's meant to be productive as such. I mean, the old logic behind it is to be destructive is to be productive. It's the colonial motif, if you like. If you destroy a city has to be rebuilt. And I can't actually see why people are surprised at that, given the history of not only the Middle East, but Western economic hegemony generally.
With its latest invasion, the White House has again claimed it is helping the fight against ISIL, given it was the US who trained and armed many who are now ISIL terrorists. Does the American public think anyone believes this?
People do probably believe it because they did it by accident. What's hard to believe is they could be that dumb, but I believe it.
I cannot speak for what the US thinks or does not think.
ISIS are a relatively recent group. Well, certainly the US has some responsibility to play for training jihadis perhaps in Afghanistan back in the 70s. I think it'd be difficult to say that they've specifically created the organization known as ISIS. I think that probably most of the world should be fairly united in thinking that ISIS objectives are not those that the rest of the world shares.
There is stuff that the U.S. can do to actually to help, but I think it is a problem that what ways that we have inadvertently funded these terrorist organizations or enabled them to emerge.
I don't believe a lot what Obama does, I'll be honest with you. I'll just be honest with you. So, but you got to deal with what you have, and you got to hope that, you know, they're doing the right thing. And every nation in the world has a leader that has good points and bad points, and we got to hope that we get people in this next election, plus especially that really have our nation's best interest at heart, the people, and they're not just corrupt, they're not greedy, they're not wanting power. So, you know, you hope that they're being honest and there's no politics being played, but it's hard to trust from what I've seen in the past. It's hard to trust sometimes.
Well, I'm sure they're trying their hardest to hurt ISIS, but it's a horrible part of the world, and there's a lot of horrible people there. And money talks, you know. They get richer by the things the Americans give them. So you're a very rich country. So yes, they'll continue to take your money, take your guns, and fire back at you. But all you can do is keep on trying to get rid of them.
I don't know, and I don't know how we fight ISIS effectively.
How credible do our experts feel America's claim to be helping the fight against ISIL actually is, given its direct contribution to ISIL's evolution?
Whether anyone believes the claim or not is a different matter altogether, but the US has to keep up the pretense. The US is very good at its PR. The PR machine is very slick. Unfortunately for them, people are seeing straight through it now at the moment, and people do realize that ISIS was funded and trained and armed in large parts by the US and its policies in the Middle East, in Iraq and Syria. And these 250 troops, they're not going there to destroy ISIS. Everyone knows that. The USA can say whatever they like, but even they believe that this is not going to help.
It's taking ISIL to be a kind of one entity. And what ISIL is more resonant of is a sort of jellyfish. I don't know how you can fight something that you can't really define, or how to fight it. Again, I'm not sure the idea is to fight it. I think that there's a whole nexus behind this that sets up, these are the guys in the white hats, these are the guys in the black hats, depending where you're standing. And it turns it into a sort of domestic argument. And I understand why that happens, because it's easy to understand, them and us. And we can get on one side or we can get on the other side. We can condemn something that there's a US will. I don't know that there's any US will. And if there is, it's so easily manipulated to vote for Donald Trump, for instance. It's not really worth much in the way of consideration about the destiny of the world. I think it's a very simplistic idea to think of ISIL as having, you know, a kind of joined up thinking. Who supports ISIL? We don't know. The things we see on YouTube, they say they come from ISIL, maybe they do, maybe they don't.
The US is sending troops into the centre of a very fragile ceasefire. Is the US just being reckless or deliberately destructive? Here's the public's view.
They're not being deliberately anything with regard to the region. What they're doing, I think, is they have limited goals of their own, certain terrorists or people that they think are terrorists that they want to kill.
I think the ceasefire is not holding as well as people would have hoped it would do on either side. I guess it's holding as well as people have predicted that it would do. I don't have an opinion on whether adding extra small numbers of people is destructive to that process, which is probably not working out as well as we all hope it would.
Yeah, now of course when you say the US, you don't mean the troops, you mean the person making the big decision, because the troops just have to do what they have to do. And that goes, I hope they're not being reckless. I've heard both sides. Should we show up in Syria? Should we leave it alone? Is it our fight? Is it not? And it's just a tough decision because you want to help really needy people, but like what happened in France, some of those folks turned out to be not the good people. So how do we know who do we need to help and how do we know what we need to do? I think it's the hardest time in the world for people to make decisions, but we have to check our heart and know, and see where we're coming from. There's good people everywhere, and you just want good people to be in the top spot, because when the bad people are in authority, the good people suffer underneath them. So I wish I could tell you exactly what's going on. I just pray a lot. I pray a lot for America, okay?
I think we're in an impossible situation, and it's difficult to know what to do. And so you do the best you can.
I think they're reckless. Yeah, because they have no real clue what they're actually doing.
In the opinion of our experts, is American military action in the Syrian conflict careless or deliberate provocation?
Well, the US has a policy of keeping this war going for as long as possible and weakening Assad. The Assad regime has been incapable of defeating ISIS up until receiving significant support from regional allies and, of course, most notably Russia. Having put ISIS on the back foot, the US is, again, in a last-ditch effort, trying to rescue their policy of keeping the Assad regime fighting against a strong enemy. These 250 troops are there to make sure that the fight carries on and the ceasefire, fragile as it is not effective.
The logic behind it is destructive. It has to be destructive. I can't really see what else it can be, given the logic behind the way the system works. If it's something called the US, whatever that is, as if there's a kind of joined up will in the US about anything, I'm not sure it is. I think if you ask the ordinary Joe or Joanne on the streets of America, they wouldn't want anything to do with any of this. I can't see how it's a sort of an American will. I can see something more, I don't know, deep and complex than that, though.
The vast majority of victories against ISIL are due to the Syrian army and regional volunteers, whilst the US has been both ineffective and destructive. What's the best way to get the US out of Syria entirely? The public said this.
They're involved in such limited ways now. The best way, the easiest way, would just be to step back and get out. But we can't do it now.
A just and long-lasting peace.
I would think that's if the situation is stabilized. I mean, that it's unfortunately not looking like it will be stabilized anytime soon, but it probably requires some sort of international effort, and I mean, the more that local powers could participate in aid, the more efficiently that may come about.
The best way to get the U.S. out of Syria is the country have their own. They don't have enough weapon to defend themselves. I would say, train their own people from their own country, and let them be the judge of fighting the war. If they need weapon to help, I think the United States should give them to them so they can, protect themselves.
The best way is probably just to get the war over with and get Syria out of there already, so that way we don't have to be in there, because there's really no reason to be in a country if there's no threat against us. And I think the reason that we're there and the reason that we should be there is because ISIS has made threats, and they have done attacks in Paris and Belgium, and in San Bernardino, that wasn't really much of a coordinated attack. It was more kind of just out there, but he did claim that he was part of ISIS. And so I think it's best just to, like I had said, just best to just get it over with, go as hard and fast, use our 100% of our military, so that way we can get out of there as quickly as possible and let that country do what they need to do.
If only I would know, then I would have the answer to world peace. But we're not at the Miss World contest, so I don't know. I really don't know.
Sure, we could pull out, but I don't believe in exclusionism. You know, I don't believe in isolationism, because globally we're all connected. So obviously I think we want to be helpful.
Given that most victories over ISIL have had nothing to do with the US intervention, can our experts suggest an effective exit strategy to get the US out of Syria?
Well, to get the United States out of Syria, you have to get the United States out of the Middle East. It's not just a question of one country, it's a question of the entire region. The United States is heavily invested in that region. It's going to take a policy of not just one country or 1 year or 1 decade. It's going to take a policy over a concerted period of time to get rid of this US hegemony and this US control over the Middle East. And it's going to take a concerted effort of a united Arab countries, not just one on its own. So to get the USA out of Syria, you have to deal with the problem of the Saudis supporting invasions of Syria. You have to deal with the problem of Saudis supporting groups like al-Nusra and ISIS, etc. in Syria. You have to deal with the problem of regimes in Iraq, in Egypt, the whole shebang, really, if you know what I mean. The whole region needs to unite and stand opposed to US imperialism. That's the only way to get the United States out of the region.
Well, again, the Syrian army, I'm not sure that there's a kind of coalescence around any set of ideas or philosophy in the Syrian army. Who controls the Syrian army? Who resources the Syrian army? Who are these volunteers? As far as we can see, everybody's fighting everybody, as far as we can see. It'd be nice to think there was such a thing of the Syrian army doing well. How do we get the US out of Syria? Well, I think we need to have a different way of thinking about the whole thing. I think we need to see this as a huge global contextual issue. We've got to think of it beyond this idea of them and us, the ISIL and America, the US and the West against the Middle East. There's much more to it than that. There's lots of interest behind whatever you want to see ISIL as. Most of those are probably at base not religious.
America is gearing up for an increased military presence in the Syrian crisis. Yet American actions largely created the problem in the first place. Further intervention, especially if not coordinated with the Syrian government, cannot realistically help control the crisis or prevent its intensification. Based on past experience, it is far more likely to simply make it worse.